Hey guys, what is going on? Who doesn't love a good old bit of classic damage control? Today we're going to be taking a look at some damage control for the video game Avowed by PC Gamer, and more specifically the god-awful performance. In recent years, garbage PC ports have just kind of become the norm for AAA gaming, unfortunately, and if you'd think anyone would have a problem with this, it would be the journalist site called PC Gamer, but you know, expecting the bare minimum from gaming journalism in 2025 is like expecting a pig to grow wings and fly. Avowed's low frame rates but smooth feeling gameplay makes me wonder if we PC gamers worry too much about the numbers. Ah yes, just a classic case of lower your expectations and stop expecting your money's worth. Truly my favorite. Yes, I know that makes me sound like a steaming hypocrite. And also a dunce. I've been spending a good chunk of my time recently testing the performance of new game releases on various PCs. FF7 Rebirth, Civilization 7, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and now Avowed. Hour after hour, day after day, constantly running benchmarks over and over, all to get a raft of performance numbers to give you an idea of how well they run across different hardware configurations. But the charts and video clips don't really tell you the full story, because they can't show you how a game feels to play. Well, I mean, they give you a pretty good idea. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to say that a game that plays at 60 FPS will play smoother than a game at 45 FPS. Basically, the higher a frame rate is in a game, the smoother it will feel to move your camera around. Also, the less amount of input lag you will have. But hey man, what the hell do I know? I'm not the expert journalism site here. And in the case of Avowed, it's quite an important thing because for the most part, it feels really smooth. Not always, of course, and not on every PC that I tested it on, but the experience is far nicer than the performance numbers suggest it should be. For example, on my Ryzen 7 5700X 3D and GeForce RTX 4070 test rig, it averages 68 FPS at 1440p with the high quality preset and no upscaling. Which, I mean, if we're gonna be honest, that's not terrible, especially considering it's an Unreal Engine 5 game. Like, when it comes to Unreal Engine 5, this is probably one of the better optimized games. But then again, that's not really saying much. So it's not, like, unplayable or anything, but let's not pretend like this is some groundbreaking performance, or it's not, like, bad overall compared to most games. Because most games perform better than this. Just because you like the game doesn't mean you can't admit that the performance is not up to par. I really enjoyed Ninja Gaiden 2 Black. I played through it recently, I got addicted to it. But dude, the performance is definitely subpar at points, and it freezes up quite a bit, like it'll do these massive stutters at certain points. And I'm not afraid to admit that. This is a problem with the gaming community. People just allow their fanboyism for certain games to get in the way of facts. Pretty decent, right? Not amazing, but not bad either. However, the 1% low frame rate, the FPS that the game is faster than 99% of the time, is just 34 FPS. That's a big difference to the average performance, and in lots of other games you'd notice that quite easily. Not so in Avowed. In fact, it feels smooth as butter on that particular PC with those settings, only the odd bit of traversal stutter spoils the picture. So it feels quote-unquote smooth as butter, but at times it literally drops down to 34 FPS. Stuttering does not feel quote-unquote smooth as butter. And I can even notice this type of thing when watching somebody else play a game, like I don't even have to be playing it myself. And a drop to 34 FPS is on a 4070. On lower end hardware, the drop can go as low as 12 FPS, as we'll see later. And it's got me wondering if we, as PC gamers, worry too much about performance, or rather focus too much on the performance figures. Yes, I know that makes me a big ol' hypocrite given that my job here is to test stuff, produce charts with lots of numbers, and then judge the products on the basis of those figures. I don't think there's such thing as focusing too hard on the numbers because at the end of the day it all comes down to personal preference. The standard that you might set for a PC game's performance might be different than somebody else. Like, if you're completely okay with the performance of this game, that's completely fine. I'm not saying that you have to hate this game because of the performance. I don't think anyone expects you to hate this game because of the performance. But don't sit out here and try to claim that the performance is good or anything like that when the numbers suggest the opposite. There's a big difference between the performance of hardware and that of a game, of course. It's not like one can go, ooh, this CPU feels like it's running really fast. It either is or isn't, and the only way to be certain is to run tests and get numbers. For games, it's different, unless it's a competitive one, especially if it's going to potentially be a source of income for you, but even then, surely it doesn't matter how fast it's running. As long as it feels okay and doesn't prevent you from achieving your desired goals, yes? Now, this is just such a pathetic cope if I'm gonna be honest. Bad performance is bad performance. It doesn't matter if it's in a competitive game, a single player game, or a fucking visual novel. Why are you so afraid to just call a spade a spade? At this point, I'm just convinced that Avowed paid these guys money to write an article like this. Nobody would ever damage control this hard without some sort of monetary incentive. The obvious issue here is that feeling is subjective, and something that feels okay to me might be excruciating for someone else. But I don't think that, in the case of games, it's so subjective that my opinion is completely irrelevant. After all, I'm in the fortunate position to be able to check out a game across more PCs than most gamers come across in years of owning a computer, so I can at least comment on relative feel. 1440p high quality preset, you can see here with an RX 6750 XT, the game literally drops down to 26 FPS, and with the RX 5700 XT down to 11 FPS. A card on par with the price of a PlayStation 5 should not be dropping to 34 FPS on 1440p high. I often come across comments in discussions about a particular game or piece of hardware where the gamer will say something along the lines of, "It has to run at 120 FPS for me or I'm not interested." Without wishing to sound like I'm denigrating such opinions, that's something I just don't get. On my own gaming PC, I really don't care what frame rate I'm getting, and I never really bothered to check the same metrics that I collate for performance reviews. It's literally a case of firing up the game, playing it as is, and then tweaking some settings until it feels great. I mean, at the end of the day, it's your PC, play it how you want. It just seems kinda weird to put out an article like this when you literally cater towards people who care about performance. You know, call me crazy, but I think the people who go to a PC analysis kinda site or whatever probably are the types of people who care about these sorts of performance issues. Avowed really is a perfect example of this. As with all games that I do performance analysis for, I spent a couple of hours getting to a point where I could carry out repeated test loops to collate and average data. Actually, I played past that point just to see if there was something better to use, but depending on how much time I have, that's not always possible. Anyway, after the said hours of working through Avowed's opening stages, I came away feeling really positive about the game, marveling at how well it ran. Well, I mean, men lie, women lie, numbers don't lie. The numbers say this game doesn't perform that great, but it's not the worst average frame rates in the world, but has very bad 1% lows. And you can't argue with the actual numbers. You can not care about them, you can ignore them, but you can't argue with them. Then I started to collate performance data across my test rigs, and was somewhat surprised to see how low some of the numbers really were. So the performance wasn't that good. A 1% low of 34 FPS compared to an average of 68 FPS should feel a bit janky. Not quite stuttery. I don't know, maybe I'm just a performance junkie, but it feels like a little miniature freeze to me when it drops like that. But hey man, not everyone's the same amount sensitive to performance drops as I am, so whatever. But certainly not smooth, and yet it does in Avowed. It actually feels worse if it runs too fast. Okay man, what the fuck? It actually feels worse if it runs too fast, if that makes any sense. Ah yes, I hate it when my game is running too smoothly. But anyway, I'm gonna end off the video here. I don't want to contract brain damage by reading any farther. If you enjoy games that have performance issues, that's completely fine, okay? I'm not sitting here saying you cannot enjoy this game. That would be stupid for me to do. But please don't sit here and make these cope-ass articles, especially as a PC analysis. Anyway, peace.